right, this is going to be interesting. Please help me welcome to the program the CEO of SLANG Worldwide. And when you see him on camera for the first time, you're going to think, wait a second, did Peter Miller send his kid? Look at this boy. Look at this nice boy.
No, my kid is at home, hopefully watching this on the internet in a couple hours.
Peter's kid is Bartholomew. Peter's the CEO of SLANG Worldwide. SLANG is, and he's just been honored recently as High Times 100 Most Influential People in Cannabis for 2019 for their leadership in the cannabis industry. Welcome, sir. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
It's quite a ride. You're, just so people aren't guessing the entire time you're here.
Yeah.
You told us before we started you're 31 years old.
Yeah. Yeah, which young in absolute terms, although depending on which period of time you're in, I was either old, late middle age. Yeah. Right now I'm approaching middle age, I suppose. But in cannabis, you know, I've been in this since it was legally possible, so I'm experienced as anybody.
No, but just getting back to your age, though, you're saying like there was a time in our world where 31 you'd have been like almost done.
Yeah, put them out to pasture.
For sure.
Hopefully, I'd have 10 kids by this point. They'd be running the farm and taking care of me.
Your name would be Ezekiel.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know, it's funny because I tried this joke a little while ago about how how remarkable it is we live to the age we are. I said, for instance, I'm nearly 60 years old. No big deal nowadays, but 100 years ago, I'd have been one of the oldest people on the planet. You know, 100 years ago, if I'd have died, that'd have been in the news. Today, the oldest guy, 61-year-old.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's not...
Just getting started. I watched Paul McCartney when he was about 61 do like a 3-hour set without taking a drink of water. Didn't change the key he was singing in, and I thought, you know, he's setting the high water mark. As long as he's out there touring and doing his thing, that's like the threshold of when.
Well, let's begin a little bit, since we're talking about your age. Let's begin a little bit. You said you got involved. You told me off before we started 6 years ago.
Yeah.
You were in the tech space.
Yep.
And I'm always fascinated, and I think it's an interesting story to tell. Do you remember that moment where you went, you know, this cannabis thing? When you felt a light of being something that would draw you to this?
Yeah, absolutely. So in November of 2012, watching the general election in the U.S., a lot of attention was drawn to 2 ballot initiatives that would legalize cannabis, one of which was in the state of Colorado. They both passed, and there was going to be recreationally legal cannabis for adults in North America, and that was kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah.
It was like insane. And then a now relative, then my girlfriend's cousin, was telling me at Thanksgiving about how there was this program in Canada where you could grow cannabis for yourself or for a designated patient, you know, with a doctor's prescription and through, you know, the appropriate paper process. I thought that sounds crazy. Like, I didn't know about that. I went online, and in December, Health Canada put out guidance describing this new thing, which then was called the MMPR, which was going to replace the old thing, which was the MMAR, and effectively created the world's first federally legal commercial market for medical cannabis, albeit highly regulated. And that set off, you know, the aha, you know, this is interesting, and could I be part of this? And
you were in a tech company?
Yep, I worked for a large tech company. We were making smallish investments in startups, so I was kind of in the startup world more as an investor. Historically, I've been an entrepreneur since I was hiring neighbors to shovel snow in the neighborhood in elementary school.
Look at you.
Shooting bat mitzvah videos in middle school, and doing a bit of a media business, which is where I met my co-founder, Billy, over 10 years ago.
Wow.
When I was doing some content for his company. So I was in media, I was in tech, saw the opportunity in cannabis, and contacted Health Canada asking when these regulations would come out. I came to find out you could get an advanced copy of the regulations a few weeks before they went into law. The date, I think, was June 19th, 2013. And so I was furiously reading these 130 pages, although it was French and English, so it could have been half of that in terms of content.
And,
and it all, naively, it all looked doable. I was like, oh, SOPs, standard operating procedures, sure, I'll write those out, you know, on menu cards. And a quality assurance program, I'll find out what that is.
Yeah. So in the early days, you know, you were looking through regulations and you were seeing this as an opportunity. because you had been in tech and because you'd been investing in some smaller companies, did you also right away, and this, I'm assuming this was before SLANG Worldwide was developed, did you see it as a way to make huge wheelbarrows full of money?
It wasn't then what it is now. So obviously you build the Excel spreadsheet and you make your assumptions and you say, if I can produce a gram a watt or even half a gram a watt, and I can sell that gram for this much money, and it cost me that much money to make it.
Like every drug dealer in the history of drugs.
It wasn't that complicated, right? You make it for this.
Seriously, guys in hoodies have made money. Yeah. Not everybody, but I'm just saying it.
I mean, but one of the biggest misconceptions about growing cannabis is that it's a great way to make money.
Ah.
It looks awesome.
Get somebody else to grow it for you. Yeah.
Boom. And ultimately, through the experience of starting one of the first licensed producers, experiencing that vertically integrated model of growing it yourself, taking it all the way to the customer, I realized that was not the best way, forward business model-wise. And so at SLANG, we purchase raw material, we process it into finished goods, a variety of formats, and then we wholesale it to retailers with our brands on it.
I want to talk about that too when we get a little bit further down in this story, to talk about finished goods and the different ways that cannabis is not only produced, consumed, and what the future of that is. But let's talk about the beginnings. Now, SLANG trades on the CSE, SLNG, if you're looking it up. And I just want to go through a couple of these things. So in 2012, you and Billy Levy, the president of the company, co-found Metrum Health Corp. And that was acquired by Canopy in 2016. So between 2012, when you were like noodling around with the regulations, all of a sudden one day Canopy calls and they buy your company.
I mean, so a couple of things. Metrum Health Corp was founded in June of 2014.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we had another entity, and it formed Metrum Health Corp with another group.
Fine.
But that aside, and sort of simplistically, yes, Canopy bought it. I mean, Metrum Health was built by a great team into one of the top licensed producers. And when that first wave of kind of big consolidation started taking place, once it was a little bit de-risked from a regulatory and market perspective, by Trudeau winning, legalization, a lot more investment interest, that happened.
Yes.
So it was part of that sort of phase pre-Constellation. But it was that whole experience, those years as part of that business and that business model that made us really excited about SLANG and visiting other markets. A lot of people have backpacked through Europe and experienced the Amsterdam thing, but when you went to Colorado in 2013, 2014, and you saw the different form factors, and you saw the evolution from glass jars with raw bud to nicely packaged confections, vapes, all of those sorts of things, it was wow, this is where it's going. This is starting to look like normal CPG.
Yeah.
That normalization will roll it across the world, and this is where I want to be.
Well, isn't that interesting? Because that's one of the things that has always fascinated me about this whole industry is that, because I've been in a bunch of legal dispensaries, and I go way back to when, forget buds in jars. I remember a guy brought it to me in a rolled up newspaper, son. But
back when a dime was a dime.
Back when a dime bag was a dime. But I've been in some dispensaries, more modern. There's one in Victoria I reference all the time called Farm.
Okay.
Very, very high-end, very knowledgeable staff. Looks like a David's Teas. It's very well appointed. And what did you call it? The different form factors?
Right.
It's just unbelievable, all the different forms that has. And again, these are companies that started like yours, servicing the American market and are now servicing the Canadian market, with marijuana in forms that have yet to even been. Most of us have never seen. Right.
And when you first saw cannabis in a liquid, inhaled through what looked like a pen.
Yeah.
That was a little bit mind-blowing.
Yes, it was.
But it became incredibly popular because it was more discreet.
Yes.
There was less...
you could do it in movies. I mean, I don't recommend it. I'm just saying if you have one. All you do is cover the end of it. Everyone who's ever had a pen, or if you haven't experimented with it, it just has a little red glow, so you know it's still engaged because they're rechargeable. But that little move of hiding the pen in the movie, it's quite a thing. One thing I would like to say, though, is, and I mentioned it this week when I filled in for James, and I talk a lot about on my little radio show, podcast, we talk a lot about how I could never have imagined, as somebody that has been smoking marijuana in some form off and on since the 1970s, I could never have imagined this revolution of marijuana in its many forms, as you say. But where does SLANG fit into the medical efficacy market, meaning not rec? Are you guys still involved, or are you involved in that?
Yeah, so the medical rec conversation is fraught with all manner of dynamics. So in some markets, the difference between medical and rec or adult use is a cash register. You buy the same product and you check out at the medical cash register or the rec cash register, and there's a tax difference, but the product's exactly the same. We're not a pharmaceutical company. I'm certainly not telling AstraZeneca or Pfizer anything they don't already know, and we're not investing in those long-term drug trial type things.
So you're going to be more rec focused?
Yeah, we're a consumer packaged goods company making products for consumers that like cannabis.
Okay. And I know that a few times I feel like, because this is a cannabis investment program, and we should talk about the company as an investment and where that's going, but I like this conversation with you that we get a sense of what you're producing, and then, as you just said to me before the show started, you say, if people want to look up the company, they can talk about the fundamentals. But how is the company doing? Are you feeling? Are you in a strong position? Are you?
Yeah, we're really excited because our whole business model is fortunately unique in the way that we can deploy capital and generate returns. Unfortunately, unique sometimes in that it's harder for people to compare it to something. We've been leaders throughout our whole lives in the industry, the management of SLANG. But our business model is such that by buying raw material, producing finished goods, and wholesaling to dispensaries, we're less exposed to wild price fluctuations at the commodity side or at the cash register. We don't have to build and own expensive infrastructure. We don't have the tax inefficiencies of retail, which I think are going to be improved significantly with the SAFE Act as it moves through the process. But the business is incredibly healthy. Our focus is on sales at the cash register. How are people voting with their dollars for particular brands? That's what tells us whether we're doing things right or not. And so we look to partners to help us achieve those goals. We're very partner-oriented. It's a massive industry with huge opportunity and a lot of white space. There's no point in having your elbows out if you can find people to, help achieve each other's goals.
I love that.
We're doing a great partnership with Trulieve for the state of Florida. For example, massive market, huge opportunity, but it didn't cost us $1 to get into that market because we leverage partnership, and we're working with the group that has the largest footprint in that state.
Now, we have had some conversation here about what it is you guys do, the health of your company. Where do you want this company to go? Is it just a North American player, or do you want SLANG all around the world?
Worldwide.
Yeah, baby.
I mean, it's going there.
Do you need a butler? I could buttle. I feel like I feel like maybe if I could just sign on with you, and people would be like, hey, Peter, who's the old guy? That's Howard. He's just he's the old Howard.
Gray hair on the team.
Gray hair, and we need some perspective.
We need someone who's been consuming since the 1970s. We need a
spiritual leader, a liaison, a guide.
Absolutely.
We'll talk about it.
Yeah, we'll talk off.
So worldwide, SLANG Worldwide.
Anywhere cannabis is being enjoyed legally by adults, we'll be there.
Okay.
I mean, the recreational legalization trend kind of started in Colorado, which is still a huge market for us. We're very dominant in the vape category. We're doing well in edibles also. They're exciting kind of shiny objects in terms of markets that are going legal or where it just went medically legal with large populations. And in those markets, it's very expensive to enter, and it takes a long time before you start generating any income. So we look for great partners that are doing that in those markets, but we're focused on the markets where people are freely purchasing and enjoying cannabis today. And that's also how we know whether our brands are resonating.
Just a couple quick questions before you go. Do you see it? 2012, it was passed medically. It took till 2013 or 14, in Colorado.
Yeah.
Do you think it'll be adopted universally in the States at some point? Obviously, in the next some number of years. I mean,
it's hard to sort of handicap that. I don't think anything is obvious. I think that there's certainly a lot of momentum and a lot of great tailwinds for the space.
Maybe more states will have medical accessibility.
Yeah, the majority of Americans live in a place where you can access cannabis legally, medically, or recreationally. I think the middle of the country will fill in, but it's possible that every state goes legal on its own before there's sort of federal consensus.
I know Colorado famously is legal. What about, because I lived in California in the 1980s, you know, Madonna.
Yeah.
And it was kind of legal. Like, the joke was, you could, as long as you weren't literally smoking in front of a cop, you weren't gonna, you might get a ticket.
Right.
It was sort of tacitly legal. Where is it now?
So California was one of the first to have some sort of legal framework as far back as '96.
But is it legal rec-wise as well?
Yeah, so about 20 years later, they voted, again, on a ballot initiative for Prop 64, which legalized cannabis and kind of taxed and regulated it like alcohol. That rolled out at the beginning of last year. And so now it's fully legal for adults to buy cannabis at stores, get cannabis delivered to them.
Of course.
It's amazing. You know, delivery is hard to beat.
It's the best.
Get your Uber Eats.
Yeah, I was going to get whatever the slang version of Uber delivery is. So you have a foothold in that market?
In delivery?
No, in
California, absolutely.
Nice.
Yeah, we have a top gummy. You know, month over month the rankings change, but near the top we're always there. We just launched a vape product like the pen that someone showed me earlier.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Nerds, you know I have a pen.
Okay.
I have a pen.
Okay. So
live with it.
We launched a product called Reserve in California a couple of weeks ago. It's doing incredibly well. We're really excited about ramping for 420. But California is going to be a great market. A lot of people there, you know, people who like cannabis, and we're seeing explosive growth in California.
Well, listen, my friend, the minute I met you, I said, there's something about this kid, and I was trying to think who you remind me of. Don't you guys think that that Peter Miller will be played by Justin Timberlake? You know, they'll be like the Sean Parker character in Social Network.
From your lips to God's ears.
All right, my friend. So interesting. SLANG Worldwide. Quite a story, and I'm sure we'll be hearing more about it. The CSE, SLNG, and Peter Miller. What a pleasure, my friend.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
All right, there he is, Peter Miller.
Thanks a lot for your time.
People.